Good evening, everyone. My name is John Tates, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are, of course, here in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Nishnaabe, Aninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. It's also of vital importance to acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. I am admittedly a little bit starstruck because we are here with one of my favorite living authors, so I could not be more delighted to be introducing her here this evening. Not that much of an introduction is required. We are here, of course, to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Theory of Water, Nishinaabe Maps to the Times Ahead by Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. Which will be hosted by the inimitable Shelagh Rogers. So just I'm going to make you applaud them both one more time. If you needed, in a moment. If you needed any other imprimatur of quality, this book is also published by Alchemy by Knopf Canada, which is, of course, Dion Brand's editorial label. So this is really coming together with one that is in a single volume. Like so much of Simpson's work, this is one of those books just so incredibly generous in its construction. It's a book that's intensely nourishing in and of itself, but just insinuates so many different maps and possible paths of learning on every single page. As with all of her books, one walks away just wanting to explore so many thousands of additional concepts that she manages to miraculously weave together into a whole in her work. So I'm delighted that she is here tonight and that we'll be able to hear a little bit more about the book. So I won't take up much more of your time, but I will read the words by somebody much more eloquent than myself, Billy Ray Belcourt, about the book we are here to celebrate. In Theory of Water, Simpson offers up a vital, indispensable text about the work of fusing thought with embodied practice in the face of colonial capitalism, which continues to derange our planet. Simpson shows through an analysis of snow and water that already codified in Nishnaabe philosophy is the blueprint to another world, one where solidarity and revolutionary struggle is always possible. A beautifully written ode to our capacity to resist state violence and imagine otherwise. Leanne will be reading from the book in just a moment, then there'll be a conversation that'll take place to my left. If time permits, we'll attempt to weave in some questions, so do allow those to percolate in your brain right now. If we do open up the floor to questions, I will approach you in a non-threatening way with this microphone, which is not because we don't trust you to project your voice, it's just to ensure that those watching at home can hear the questions. Your host, Shelagh Rogers, is a recovering broadcast journalist. TRC honorary witness, and she had the honor of interviewing Leanne on CBC Radio's The Next Chapter 5 times over 15 years. She's thrilled to be here this evening to speak with Leanne about Theory of Water. Leanne Betasamosake Simpson is a Michi Saki Nishnaabeg scholar, writer, musician, and member of Alderville First Nation. She is the author of 7 books, including the recent nonfiction, A Short History of the Blockade, and the acclaimed novel, Nishnaabeg, A Cure for White Ladies. Please give her an immensely warm welcome.
Ani Kinawaya, Gitigavijina Denewema, Kinagachi Nishnaabe Gogumina Donjaba, Nagojawani Mengwadoda, Betasamosake Nishnaabe. I moved to Winnipeg from Thunder Bay in the spring of 1997, and Winnipeg taught me about flooding. So while I was centering with Winnipeg, I learned about flooding. And so the excerpt that I want to share today is an origin story. It was told to me by Doug Williams-Baugh, who was an elder I worked with for almost 3 decades from Kirk Lake First Nation. The story starts with Shwe Manado, who is a benevolent energy that loves living things unconditionally. Shwe Manado is at the same time all the genders and none at all. The precursor to life and to world building wasn't a plan or a campaign or an action or even an intention of something better. It was love, a deep sense of care, hope, truth, and kindness, a loving anyway and in all the ways. Before the idea of the world, before the making of the world, the inspiration, the know-how, the intercommunal creations, there was care and there is love. I understand love encoded in the word Shwe as being unconditional. It's an organizing force, a motion, and an ethic of caring. Shwe is a communal love, not bound up in the individual or with the romantic. It's love as an ethic that is animated within our relations and from where there propels customs of kindness, generating empathy and systems of care for all the forms of life that make up our world. It is love as an organizing force, as an architecture in the Nishnaabe cosmos, one amongst many other organizing forces, but an organizing force nonetheless. Shwe Manado had a dream of the world, the one that we know today with the oceans and the rivers, the forests and the deserts, the mountains and the glaciers, the prairie and the sky, the plants, the animals, and the humans. And with dreams and visions come responsibility. So Shwe Manado knew they had to make it happen. The earth happened and everything was created instantly and everything was beautiful. This went on for a long time. Everyone was getting along, and in Nishinaabe Moan we call it Kina B'Madzuin, the big kindness. But Doug taught that this peace didn't last, and that one day things started to go very wrong. Everything died off and no one knew why. He says, it could be that life is not that easy to keep. It could be that life is fragile. It could be that in making life, we don't always get it right. It could be that in isolation, no individual or community has the knowledge we need to build worlds. It could be that world making is struggle. Most things died off. All the earthbound life died and was gone. Only the sun and the great waters were saved. This bothered Shwe Manado, and they were upset. This resonates with me in the present moment, sitting on the edge of climate collapse, genocides, and overwhelming world endings. I'm imagining indigiqueer Shwe Manado in the sky world, scrolling on their phone, watching Netflix in bed under a weighted blanket, feeling bothered because the place they had created got into trouble. But Shwe Manado doesn't stay in this place for very long. The spirits that lived in the sky went to Shwe Manado and asked if they could help. The first time Shwe Manado created the world, they did it alone and it didn't work. Shwe Manado was in no state to go back to Earth and start recreating, and so when help was offered, they agreed. They asked another spirit who is different in character and work from themselves to try. They asked Gijigokwe, Sky Woman, to go down to the earth to see if creation could be repaired. Gijigokwe's work was not easy. The first time she tried, her 2 children died and she was consumed by grief. Something was not working right for Shwe Manado's dream. It wasn't coming together. Gijigokwe went back to the sky world to visit with Shwe Manado and try and figure out what happened. I imagine the two felt a deep despair, having both tried and failed. They were now both grieving, perhaps stuck in the fog of bereavement, unable to see clearly. In the meantime, back on Earth, a great flood happened, covering the earth with water, washing over and nurturing the land and changing the physical surface of the earth. Nibi saw the problem and did the work only they can do in hope that it would move things along. Nibi didn't have to act. Nibi, though, was thinking beyond themselves and beyond their responsibilities. Nibi was living in kindness, witnessing and empathizing the struggle of both Shelagh Manado and Gijagokwe. They were witnessing and listening beyond themselves towards a new collectivity. They listened and they responded to the present moment. Within Nishinaabe world-making, water is crucial. For humans, we first exist in a watery world that meets our needs, and we learn what it feels like to be safe. Water that I breathe in becomes a constituent that makes up most of my body. Water that I breathe out becomes part of someone else's body. Water travels the world over, moving easily through land, air, soil, rock, and bodies. Said in another way, Nibi continually violates the home spaces of everything on the planet. It might take a very, very long time, but Nibi always escapes the container. Nibi reminds us that we can build all the enclosures we want, including our own bodies, but there are world-making forces building and maintaining the planet that are planetary, that are beyond us. In fact, if Nibi is enclosed, they work away, seemingly gently, incredibly persistent and unsuspecting until the enclosure is eroded away and an undercut or an arch or a hole appears as chasm and rupture. Nibi never gives up. They keep at it in the beginning when it seems absolutely impossible, through the years of seeing no progress to the point where they think they might be imagining or wishing a transformation, through the hopelessness of incremental change, until finally, after everyone but Nibi has given up across an incomprehensible time frame for living things, a miraculous rupture. Perhaps world-making is the practice of communal struggle. Shelagh Manado and Gijagokwe continued their visit in the sky world. They comforted each other. Shelagh Manado encouraged her and told her not to give up, to keep trying. Gijagokwe eventually makes the decision to go back to the earth and keep trying. She encounters Nibi's flood, a catastrophic upheaval that has left the world in a completely different place than when she was last there. Here is the world. It's only water. There is no land. There is no land back. There are no homelands. There are no humans. In time, Gijagokwe found animals in the water that had survived the flood because they could swim or fly. Loons, beavers, and muskrats. Ship Mikanak came to the surface and offered Gijagokwe a place to land and rest. The animals Gijagokwe found needed help. They needed care. They also needed a place to rest because they had been swimming or flying endlessly for days. Maybe they weren't even thinking of making a world at this point. Maybe they were only thinking of caring for the ones that were near exhaustion. Maybe they worked together to meet the material needs of their immediate community, which was a place to rest. Each being giving up what they could to support the others. Gijagokwe rested on the back of the turtle with the beavers and the muskrat and the other animals, a communal place of refuge. Over time, Gijagokwe noticed the design on the turtle's back. She ran her finger around the rim of the shell and felt its meaning. 13 parts in the middle, 28 sections around the edge. She felt its meaning because her body cycled each moon, and her body's practice of cycles enabled her to see the moon cycles on the turtle's back. The turtle shell was a map. It was a map of cycles, 13 moons, 28 days each. Turtles still carry that map today, as does the moon, as do people who menstruate. The turtle was showing her that what was missing in Joey Manado's previous design was cycling and renewal. Not even Joey Manado is perfect, because the job of Joey Manado is not perfection. The job of Joey Manado is unconditional love. After a while, the loon, a bird that can swim and float, offered to dive to the bottom. The loon was gone for a long time and finally floated to the surface, drowned. The loon had tried so hard, it died trying. Same with otter, same with beaver. Next came muskrat, same thing, tried too hard and floated to the surface. But when the muskrat floated to the surface, Gijago noticed they had a handful of earth. She put the handful of dirt onto the turtle's back, and it grew into the prairies and the sky and the mountains and streams and lakes, and then into clouds and wind and rain and trees and beautiful animals. And this world was created. Sometimes there is a larger benefit to others in plowing through. Gijago went back to the sky world and became the moon. She became the one to watch over and regulate the cycles needed to bring forth life on earth. Her form cycles, and she visually reflects through her phases the cyclical nature of the universe. Some call her Nokomis, or grandmother, or Kukum. Others call her Dibigizis, the night sun. We were given the responsibility of Minobamadzwin, of living in a way that contributes to the continuous rebirth of all living things on the planet. We were given the responsibility to not remake the world, but to fit into the complex networks of interconnection and interdependence of the ecosystems that make up the planet.
About to be adjusted there. Leanne, that was so beautiful. And it made me think as you were describing this world, why would we ever want to wreck such a beautiful place? I mean, it's so beautiful. That's what it is. And even thinking about elections, and I'll never say it again tonight, I promise. But so much of what was coming forward was what's about to be destroyed and what's about to be extracted. I suppose this is just a rhetorical question, really. But you tell a beautiful story. And if we thought in cycles, how different would the world be?
I feel like this present moment of genocides in Gaza and Sudan and Congo, of climate catastrophe, of Trump thinking of invading, of increased pressure on Indigenous territories for extraction, of the violence of ethnic cleansing in the US, of the target on trans people's backs. All of this makes me think of sitting on that turtle's back, of trying to figure out ways of meeting the immediate needs of the living things that I'm sharing time and space with. All of these, this moment. And so I think the present moment keeps bringing me back to this story over and over and over again. And my favorite part of this story and my favorite part of this book is that moment where Gijago recognizes this missing piece is cycling and renewal. And I think my ancestors had this beautiful way of living. Our ancestors got up every day and they made the world. They made their political system and their spiritual system and their foodways and their arts and their clothing. And they were creators and makers. And they knew then that cycle of renewal and interdependence. They knew how to weave themselves into the ecosystems of the planet in a way that brought forth more life. And I think that's the shift.
And they didn't give up.
They didn't give up, and water doesn't give up. The steadfastness, the perseverance of water, of Nibi's embodied practice is something that I think is really a collaborator in this book. Yeah.
You've been thinking about water for a long time, and it's reflected in your earlier books as well. Nopaming, A Cure for White Ladies, begins with the narrator under the frozen surface of a lake. When you're writing letters to Robin Maynard in Rehearsals for Living, you're also talking about water and practice and cycles and practice and rehearsals and practice. What is it that we're missing about not practicing?
I really love the idea of rehearsals because mistakes in rehearsals are generative. And so anytime you have people coming together and making something, whether it's on the land, whether it's behind barricades or blockade, or whether it's in an urban setting, there is the potential for us to connect, to deepen our relationships, and to generate the knowledge and the skills that we need to dream and bring forth another way of living in another world. So I find those rehearsals and those practices really, really generative in terms of connecting and in terms of producing knowledge.
What does that mean to you as also a musician?
I think the best part of being a musician is the rehearsals. There's a lot of musicians in the audience right now. So I think that what I've learned from being a musician, what I've learned from touring is that it's a difficult life on the road, and singing the same songs over and over again with the same lyrics is a repetitive process. But there's always this moment with whatever piece you're working with where you connect with an audience or in a particular environment and the light bulb goes off and you learn something about your own lyrics that you didn't see before. And I love that practice, and I love those moments.
And so much of our teaching would have been repetition, and the ancestors' teaching certainly was repetition.
For sure, because we were following the cycles of the seasons. And so every March we would be in my territory in the sugar bush. In the fall we were doing wild rice. There was a repetition to our daily lives that kind of scaled up and scaled back. And I think that was a powerful way of living.
I want to know what your origin story is for the book. What began it? What began Theory of Water?
Well, in a lot of ways, as an Nishnaabe Kwe, I'm late to the party about water. Like really late to the party. Josephine Mandamin has walked around the Great Lakes twice, and Leanne writes about land. Autumn Pelche is at the UN, talking about water, and I'm still writing about land.
Catherine Sinclair walked around Lake Winnipeg. Catherine Sinclair Ba. Yeah, and there you are. But now you're writing about what?
And so I always, thought water was a part of the land, but I think for me, I was focused on picking up some of the pieces that colonialism had shattered and putting that back together for me. I think that in our ceremonies and in Nishinaabe culture, water is the responsibility of women, and I felt like that was kind of gendered, and I felt a little rebellious about that maybe. And then the shift happened when I recognized that every living thing on the planet has a relationship to water. There's a part in, I think, the last letter that I wrote to Robin Maynard, where we have been having this pen pal relationship back and forth through the pandemic, connecting Black feminist community to Indigenous thought and Indigenous feminism, and we're starting at that end to think beyond the two of us. and to think about how to connect to other anti-colonial movements. And I start writing there about water as thinking about the global water cycle, how the same amount of water has been here when the earth was created, how it connects us across vast geographies in time and space, how it's kind of very queer in that it transforms from a solid to a liquid to a gas. So I really thought that I wanted to spend some time learning from the embodied practice of water. There's a quote in the book from Dionne Brand's Nomenclature where she asked, what does it mean to listen to water? And then I think another origin story for the book comes from Rebecca Belmore's work. And so after the Oka crisis, she made Speaking to Our Mother, which is this big megaphone that she took across Turtle Island to different reserves and barricades, and people were able to speak directly to the land. Then later on, almost 20 years later, she made Wave Sound, where she has listening pieces that were installed on the shore so you can listen to water. And so I began to ask myself, what happens when we listen to water? What happens when we believe in water? What happens when we think with water? What kinds of worlds and formations are possible? What kind of living is possible?
You begin theory of water. You're actually on skis and you're flying on ice, really, and you're sintering. Tell us about sintering.
So my day job is that I work in the Northwest Territories at a Dene land-based education program, and I spend a lot of time driving a skidoo there. And so during one of the pandemic winters, I decide to volunteer at our local urban ski trail to be a groomer, in part to keep up my skidoo driving skills so that I don't embarrass the Nishnaabe in front of the Dene. But I'm a bit of a poet, so I'm probably not grooming that well, not really paying attention. I'm listening to podcasts, and I start to think about sintering. I start to think about this idea that when a snowflake falls from the sky world to the land, it begins a bonding process to the other snowflakes, its neighboring snowflakes. Its edges of the snow crystal become rounded. And that was really interesting to me because the first thing that a snowflake does when it lands from the sky world is belongs. It weaves itself into the environment in a way that doesn't destroy itself and in a way that doesn't destroy its neighbors. And that appeared those early mornings to be a really powerful teaching. And this was coming at a time where I was grieving because Doug had passed away. And I was thinking about this enormous body of knowledge that I no longer had access to. I was very sad, and I was trying to think if I could take some of the skills and the teachings that he had passed on to me and learn directly from the land, learn directly from the snow. And I think sintering is what spoke to me.
You write that you were not expecting the snow to teach you how to live in the world. And this was a real gift.
It was a real gift because I feel like I grew up in Wingham, Ontario, which is on the lee side of Lake Huron. It's in the snow belt. We've got a tremendous amount of snow. I work in the north. I wasn't expecting at this point in my life to learn something so profound from something that I thought that I knew. And that was, again, I think, coming from that repetition and coming from doing something, having a relationship with something over and over and over again in a cyclical way, and then seeing something different.
How were your ancestors at sintering?
I think my ancestors were very, very good at centering, very, very good at centering. They were able to weave or braid themselves into the land in a way that brought forth this concacophony of life. And I think in a society that it feels like a death machine, that is eliminating species, that is eliminating groups of people, this seems like a very, very deliberate, powerful way of living.
You mentioned Dion Brand, and it was Dion Brand's idea to have you and Robin publish the letters that you had written to each other in rehearsals that became the book, Rehearsals for Living. She's a part of this book as well. Can you talk about Pinery Road and Concession 11?
So one of my favorite books of Dion's is a Map to the Door of No Return. And it was written about 20 years ago. We had a big celebration, and I can't remember exactly when this was, but it was during the pandemic and it was all on Zoom. And I was asked to respond to part of the book. And so I was rereading the book, and near the end, there's a chapter called Pinery Road and Concession 11. And I looked at Pinery Road and Concession 11, and it was extremely close to where I live. It was in my homeland, it was in my territory. And so after struggling with zero ideas, I decided to go to Pinery Road and Concession 11 and stand there. And at the time, I was multitasking because my mom had given me this black ash basket that one of her friends had given her because their mother-in-law, it's a convoluted story, had bought the basket on Shimon Lake 50 years ago. And she had given it to my mom to repatriate it to the community. So I was driving this basket back to the community while I was on my way to Pinery Road and Concession 11. And so it became a way of thinking through dispossession, belonging, with Dion in a linked way, but recognizing that Dion's experience was quite different than mine.
And you're actually driving past all kinds of election signs too at this point, right?
I'm driving past all these election signs that are threatening because they're from the far right. I'm driving past cottages, I'm driving past, I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm not feeling like I belong to my homeland. I'm feeling afraid. And I think in that section of Dion's book, her car breaks down in this rural place, and there's an element of fear because she's not sure she's safe. And going back to this crossroads, I was having similar feelings. And so I ended up, my partner and I installed an iPhone at a farm stand in the corner and took pictures every few seconds for 24 hours.
Surveillance.
And we surveilled it as a way of, I think, flipping the script a little bit on settler surveillance.
Wow. I want to know more about the black ash basket itself and what goes into, you describe this so beautifully in the book, but what goes into making a black ash basket?
So there's not very many black ash trees left because of climate change, but black ash was a really important material that people would weave baskets out of. And so Doug remembers going a little bit north of Curve Lake, harvesting the trees, canoeing them back, and then they would pound them so the tree rings would separate. And that reminded me of a mapping of topology, a mapping of relationships. And so they would take the tree rings and then weave them into baskets.
It's almost like mapping time as well.
Yeah, mapping time and relationships.
And weather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are a lot of lessons from water. There are lessons about organizing from water. Can you talk about what water teaches us about organizing?
I think that I think that that story that I shared teaches that this world came from struggle, and it came from organizing, and it came from a lot of different beings figuring out how to work together to produce something. And so there's some sort of solace in that for me, I think, because it instructs me that, first of all, that my job isn't to remake the world. My job is just to knit myself into the ecosystems that already exist. And that I don't have to do that. I don't have to have all the answers. And I think it's clear in the book that I don't have any answers, actually, but that
Theories.
I wanted to sort of have an orientation where the book felt more like an invitation, because I think that we need a lot of different perspectives to weave together this and organize ourselves into a different way of living together.
What water gives us, obviously, life so much. It sustains us. What are our responsibilities to water?
I think that that's for each of us to figure out. And I think that each of us will have a different set of responsibilities. And I think that that's really beautiful. There will be overlap. In case some of us aren't able to carry our responsibilities for a while, there will be others. But I think that I would never sort of prescribe what other people's responsibilities are. I think my responsibility, which took me a very long time to come to, was to think alongside water and to pay attention to the embodied practice of water and what this teacher had been teaching me for my entire life that I didn't really notice or get. Yeah.
This is Doug. You're speaking about Doug Williams? No, you were talking about water as the teacher. But can I ask you about Doug Williams and water and his reluctance to really go deeply into the water with you?
I was always asking Doug a lot of direct questions, and he was always taking me out goose hunting or taking me to the sugar bush or taking me to do stuff. He wasn't answering my questions directly. I know now that he was teaching me and showing me through embodied practice like elders do. And I think that he was reluctant to talk about water because he was respectful that it wasn't his place within our culture. But also I think he was leading me through the things that we did to opportunities to wayfind, I guess, to find my way and to find my own relationship with water. So he was never, you have to think about it like this, or these are the rules, or this is the teaching, but he was leading me through the network to find my own answers. And my own answers are different than his. I would often share my interpretations of stories, and he would be just like, oh my God, Leanne, like, you just think these things to death. Like, just stop, it's not that complicated.
It feels very much as though you wrote Theory of Water alongside him, though. He's a presence in the book.
I mean, I think, to be very honest, I was coping with grief while I was writing it, and I was missing him. And so I think what my brain and my heart did was think, get up every morning and spend time with him, thinking through these ideas. And that was, I think that made me feel less lonely and less sad. And I think at the Peterborough Lounge, it was really beautiful when some of his old friends were able to hear his voice in the work. Yeah.
That would mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about land, water, of course, but you also talk about shoreline. And what's the significance? How do we look at shoreline?
So I've learned a lot about shorelines from Madeline Wheaton, who is a Michi-Sagi Nishnaabeg scholar, and also from Sarah Hunt. And they both talk about shorelines as being a spot where Nishinaabe people learn about consent and accountability because shorelines are places where worlds are overlapping. I spent some time on a shoreline today at the river, and you have the water world, you have the land world, and you have the sky world. And so there's this diversity of species, there's a density of fish and four-leggeds and birds, and there is a negotiation, there's responsibilities and accountability and communication. And so these worlds of overlap, I think, are sites that we need to pay attention to.
Shorelines are beautiful.
They're beautiful and they're profound, and we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of different kinds too.
I wonder if that means.
I think someone's throwing things from backstage.
What has water taught you about listening?
I mean, I think that the best kind of listening is the kind of listening you can do with an open heart, where you're feeling calm and where you can sink into the vibrations and the energy of what you're hearing. I think it's really hard in the world that we're living in because there's a lot of noise that you sort of have to filter through to find that song and to find the whispers and the nuance. But I think it's something that's a practice, and it's something that that I don't know the answer to because I think I haven't listened enough yet. Yeah.
Heart listening, whole being listening. Yeah, it's a practice. Something I'm trying to figure out too, believe me. We're going to turn to you for questions if you have any. If you don't, I'll just carry on madly the way I've been going. But if you do, you're more than welcome, and I always recognize it's hard to be the first, except for you.
Friends that I have who are authors, while they're writing a book, often are gestating the next one. Have you any idea what direction your next writing will take?
I do, because this one took a long time to come out because I really wanted to work with Dion Brand and I wanted her to edit this book, and she edited it a lot. There's a lot on the cutting floor, and all of it was academic. I was thinking alongside a lot of Black feminists in the original first draft, and she was like, this is not serving you. This is cluttering your voice and what you're trying to say, and it needs to get out. And so I think because I trusted her, we got it out of there. But I have another novel that's in the works called The Breathing Lands, that's also going to be coming out with Alchemy. Yeah. And then I've been writing about solidarity and some of the, I guess, lessons that you learn from the land, but I'm not sure what form that book will take. Yeah.
You often write music along writing. I know Theory of Ice is an album, but is Theory of Water going to be songful?
No, but there is a line in Theory of Water that comes from Madeline Weitang's dissertation, and it's called Live Like the Sky, and that is the name of the next record, which is coming out in the fall on New Change Records. And it's sonically it's really different, I think, than my other work because I wanted to revisit the music that I loved as a teenager growing up, and so it has a lot of 1980s references. Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
gonna be fun.
Yeah, it's fun,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Michael,
What books do you love lately, or what book do you love?
That's a good question. I feel like I have a lot of, I've just read Omar's book, everybody already. Yeah, and that book is very dear to my heart. The writing is very profound, it's very moving. I spent a lot of time on planes, and that was one of the books that, you know, I started reading in Vancouver, and I was finishing it as we landed in Toronto and had no idea that the drink cart had even gone by. Yeah, so I think that's one of my favorites right now. Yeah.
Maybe likened to what you're interested in immersive in. I'm just wondering, I'm guessing I would not expect, but are you familiar much with Joy Harjo?
Yeah.
Also, being a dear fan of hers, esteemed Ms. Harjo, would you say there is anything of her works that you feel like has inspired your own art in any particular way? And if anything particular, I'd love you to name something.
I think her poetics, I think that she's been writing for a very long time. And so I think through her example, I learned that you can have a body of work as an Indigenous woman, and that that body of work can say profound things, but also be said in a very beautiful way. I think that's what I learned from her.
There's someone actually sewing, and it's kind of like, yes, you. It's kind of like when you're at an auction, and you know, and I saw your hand go up, but you're crafting something as we go. What is your process to create a book before it gets to Dion Brand?
It feels like it's a little bit mysterious. I feel like I'm not trying to detonate genres and disciplines. I'm just trying to do what I do. I like writing in the morning. I like to have enough space in my life to be able to write every morning, which is sometimes difficult. I give myself permission in a first draft to say whatever I need to say. So to, I guess, gift myself with a bit of freedom in that first draft, so that my brain is not self-centering or self-censoring before the kind of creative process. And then I bring that voice, that critical voice, back in during the drafts. But I think that that's a really important practice that I've learned working through being blocked. Yeah.
Word practice again, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I really loved the Theory of Ice record, and was a little disappointed that I never got to see any kind of live performance of it. But the record you mentioned coming out in the fall sounds like something you might perform on a larger scale. Is there any chance of that?
I hope so. I mean, it was really difficult with Theory of Ice because of the pandemic. So that curtailed things, and it's pretty hard for me financially in the economy of it with a larger group of musicians, but I'm hopeful. Yeah, I'm hopeful.
Really love Theory of Ice too. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, I have a question, and it's not my question. It's Tina Turner's question.
I'm so glad you could bring Tina Turner. Sheila.
It's my favorite question. Thank you. What's love got to do with it?
I am happy to report I've never been asked that question. I think that I've started to see love in the way, well, in multiple ways, but in the new way as the way that I described it in the reading, as this ethic of care and responsibility and commitment, and again, as a practice. And I think that it's also something that's very, very necessary in terms of centering, in terms of making coalitions with our neighbors, in terms of dreaming and building otherwise. So I think it's what what's love got to do with it? It's everything. It's got to do with everything. And I think that collectively, finding a practice for us to come to the aid of each other and to care very deeply for each other is something that's a part of Indigenous communities and the way that our ancestors lived.
I love how you write about how our ancestors lived. And you get really macro about what they did year after year and providing for their families and going out and chopping wood in the winter and survival. And then micro, like saving elastics and those blue plastic bags that milk used to come in and so on. What was that ethos?
I think that I talk about it in the book. There's a line where some of that was motivated by poverty, but some of it was motivated by love. And so it's a reframing of that, looking at possessions as belongings instead of property, where you extend relationships of care to those belongings. I think that shift helped me understand why my mom or Doug had all of this saved stuff inside their kind of tiny houses that I might just call clutter, but it served a purpose and they saw value in it and they saw potential in it for reuse in the future. And so I liked that way of framing it.
I'm gonna go through to the audience again one more time. Oh, the two who've already asked questions, awesome. Okay, it's fine.
Sometimes I come across an idea, a phrase, a word that at a very least evokes something so fun, so interesting within me. And I think the idea you shared of weaving oneself into the world just is something that hits immediately. I immediately wrote down weaving, braiding, knitting. And I guess, what has that idea, you feel like, done for you since you came across it in the way that you have?
I think it's helped me feel like I belong. And I think that it's also helped me to connect to groups of people, to cultures, to species that are not directly in my proximity or in my homeland, but that my homeland, the lakes, the rivers, connect me to. So it helps me think of life as not a hierarchy, but a network. And I think that shift in my thinking has been important.
That's a beautiful question.
I don't know if you know, but McNally Robinson has an aspect of the store called Prairie Inc. And for a long time, they had wonderful music. And you have quite a following here. So if there's ever a way, I think you've got a fan here as well.
Let's get that organized.
So I really invite you to think about, even if you don't have other people producing the music with you, you would share how you see music just of yourself.
That's a great idea.
Well, I want to thank you so much for this beautiful book. The word generous keeps coming up. John used it. I just feel it's such a beautiful offering. And I thank you again, Chief Mitch, for speaking with me and for this book. It's so gorgeous. And thank you as well, and to the people who are viewing online, and the person in the back room who's operating online. We're grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for everything that you've done over the years for authors and to support writing in Canada. It's so meaningful to all of us, and it was really an honor to be in conversation finally in real life after years of Zoom. It's really amazing, and thank you all for coming. It's so wonderful to look at and see old friends and new friends in the audience, and I appreciate the support.
Thank you both so much. It's been a real privilege to be able to hide in my cave and listen to the conversation over the course of this evening. I'm sure everyone here feels very much the same. I will put a quick idea in everybody's head just right now. We will ask you to remain in place for one quick second while we safely transport Leanne to a signing table just beside our cash desk, and then you may come over and have copies of the book signed. Just a quick note, Leanne is of course our author of the month this month, so conveniently located across from the signing table, you'll also find a large display of all of her other works as well. So please do avail yourself of any of those if you would like. We do also have some copies of the LP and the CD on the table as well. And if there's anything that you're looking for, just flag down myself or a colleague and we'll get it for you. I would also just mention too, if there's anybody here who is unable to stand for the signing, please just let me know. And I hope all of you will just gently indulge us as we bring them up to the front to get their book signed. The only final thing I will say is that you can get a copy of the book signed before you pay for it, but we do ask you to please pay for the book before you pay. We are so very grateful to Alchemy by Knopf Canada. So grateful to all of you for coming and for sharing your attention and your questions. I'm going to ask you to join me in 2 more rounds of applause once again. The first is for, of course, Shelagh Rogers. And the other for the brilliant Leanne Betasamosake.